Hey, welcome back to the channel. Remember that time, I don't know, year and a half ago, I tore the head off our ProStock Diesel so I could put a different head on it? I think I'm finally ready to go ahead and do it. No sense rushing into things, right? That was dumb. That was dumb. Every tool's a hammer, unless it's a screwdriver, then it's a chisel.
We need a torch. Hate that nut.
We're not doing that. Because it ain't built till it's overbuilt. Don't force it. Get a bigger hammer. Every day's a school day. So if you've seen some of the older videos on my channel, I did one where I tore down this diesel tractor. We had cracked a head on this, and I got another head, but there was a little machine work needed, and it just never seemed to float to the top of the priorities. But finally, I got around to getting this head prepped, and I think I'm ready to get it on the tractor. But just in case you found this video because you're thinking of building a ProStock Diesel, ProStocks and limited ProStocks are a little different animal, but I figured I could show you some of what, I'm not saying it's what you need to do, but some of what's been done to this one to get it to where it is. Come on, I'll show you what I mean.
So we had to go take about 103.84 inches. Up next on hook and tailoring, and the hole is tail in.
All right, here we are. This is the new head, new to me head. And we had a little machining work we had to do to make it work for us, and I'm going to show you what that was about. Part of it was to do with the dowel pin locations on the head for whatever. This engine's a Yanmar 3TN78, and for whatever reason, they make some different heads for different applications, and the dowel pin holes are off by just a half of a hole, which is really great. I'll show you how I fix that. Show you why I think this head's better than the old head. But I'm gonna have to bring you in here because there's no way you're gonna see it from back there. But the other machining that it needed was you have to machine it to take larger injectors. So ours is set up to use a stock, well, I guess it wouldn't have to be stock, but ours uses a stock injector from a DT466, a 1066 tractor application. So it's a lot more injector than the stock Yanmar. Amazingly, they made it pretty easy to convert them over. I'm sure they didn't mean to, but I'll show you a stock injector in ours and what you have to do to convert these heads over to run those big injectors. And you know, it's like anything, you don't necessarily have to do that to run in this class. Like I said, the ProStock class is the top diesel class in garden tractor pulling, and it's a class that's not taking off very good, and I think it's because of the cost of entry, which is more than a limited pro. A ProStock is a little bit bigger cubic inch, and that's basically because it was designed around this engine, which is a 75 cubic inch engine. So a little bigger cubic inch. The difference between a limited pro and a ProStock, the biggest difference is fuel. ProStocks are unlimited fuel, so you can run a Bosh 8-pump on them, whereas the limited pros are cam box limited. So you're as far as I know, you're stuck with indirect injection, and you're stuck with whatever you can fit inside that I'm sure guys are doing all sorts of things, but it needs to fit in that stock cam box. So I wish the class would take off. It's a fun class to be in. And yes, it certainly is more money. And like I had said in the earlier video, our tractor is not necessarily, on the cutting edge of the ProStock class. But it even still is really a fun tractor to drive, I can tell you that. But let me just get right to it. I'll bring you in and I'll show you what we did here, and kind of hopefully you can understand what it takes to get a stock head ready to run in this class. There's a lot more to the engine, of course. I'm only going to talk here about cylinder head prep because that's all that I've got ready to show you here. All right, so this is the head that we had on there, and it cracked. It cracked in a couple spots, and they're real hard to see. I doubt if you'll see them on the camera, but you can kind of tell why. It's thin right there between the intake valve and that injector, and 2 cylinders. One of them not bad and may not have been leaking, but this one cracked. The last event I ran it at, we pushed antifreeze out and knew something was up. So I was hoping it was a head gasket, but of course it never is. So I got a different head, and you'll notice right away. Let me spin this around. You'll notice right away that this head, I think, is a much better head. It has a lot more meat on the surface here because it doesn't have all these cutouts for coolant flow. Which first I thought, well, maybe that's not good because we still run a wet block and a wet head. A lot of guys fill them and run them dry. We're not there. In fact, if I were to fill this head, it would still be a good head, I would imagine. So I'm going to hold on to this. But I like to have coolant, mainly because if you ever want to run, if you're ever the test puller and you want to come back, the class is small. There's usually only a few tractors in it. You don't have time to really cool it off adequately. And we have this set up with an electric water pump and electric fan, and we can shut it off and circulate the water and run the fan and cool this tractor off pretty quickly. So I don't really want to give that up, although I wouldn't mind losing the weight. We haven't done it yet anyways. But my first thought was we're going to lose a lot of cooling. Well, you don't really, because the head gasket limits where the water is going to flow, and it's only through these holes that it leaves. There's head bolt holes, and then there's the coolant passage holes. So, this new head has ports that line up with all those same passages. So it really isn't going to affect coolant flow. It just affects how much iron there is on this surface, and maybe it won't help because, like I said, the crack was in here, but I think it can't hurt. So I was happy to see that the head had a little more meat to it. Like I had said, I probably wouldn't have even noticed this until I went to put the head on, but if you look at this, this is the head gasket that was on it and the head that was on it, right? So these dowel pin holes here and here line up. And all they're really for is so that the gasket sits on the block correctly and then the head sits on there and lines up. Well, I can't really show you with the gasket anymore, but if you look, you'll see what I did was I epoxied, there we go. I epoxied the old hole in. This is where we need the hole to be in order to line up with the block and the head gasket. So I don't know why they did that. If somebody knows, I'd be interested. Why in the world they have some blocks that are off by that little bit from a bunch of others. But for whatever reason, that's what they did. So that was the first thing we needed to do. We filled those holes and we remachined 1/4 inch diameter, 1/4 inch deep. We put this in the milling machine, did that with an end mill. Could you do it with a drill bit or something? I don't know. Maybe you could, but I wouldn't recommend it. Strip the head down to bare iron. Get it to a machine shop if you're not a machinist. But this is, if you explain to them what needs to be done, at least you go into it knowing what what has to happen, you know. And that's pretty simple for a machine shop to do. So we did that while we had it held there. We took just a skim cut on the face. It wasn't too bad, but it can always stand to just touch it and freshen it up. So we probably took 5/1000ths off the face of it. We didn't have any need to go any more than that. It cleaned up nice at that. But let me show you the deal with the injectors. I got to get the camera on a stand here. All right. So these are 1066 tractor application injectors. I don't know what other DT466 applications use the same injectors, but that info shouldn't be too hard to find out. One of the nice things about switching to this injector is once you've made the switch, now you got something that's aftermarket supported. I mean, you can, the sky's the limit on fuel once you go to these. Well, not quite, because at a certain point, even they would have to machine the head bigger, and you're pretty much at the limit here as far as a bigger injector tip. So there again, I don't know enough about them to say how far you could go before you had to step up again from these. This is a stock injector body, but I'm guessing you could get all the fuel that an A pump can make and all the fuel that this engine can handle. This bore and stroke is a whole lot smaller than a 466. So I got to assume this is the biggest injector body you could ever need in this application. So just for comparison, there's a stock Yanmar injector, and there's the 466 injector. It's not a huge difference, but what was really interesting to me was how similar the tips of them are, you know? It's almost like they want you to swap them out, right? So to get them in there, really, all you need to do is enlarge the bottom part of the hole. The bodies are the same size, same diameter. The outside of the injector bodies are the same. So the clearance hole in this side of the head is fine. That doesn't need to change. You use the 1066 gaskets at the bottom. The only thing you have to do is open up that hole, and I'll show you how I did it. I made a drill bushing that, right, look at, you can't be a ramrod about it. You got to either take the time to make something nice, or have a machine shop make you something nice, or just have them do the work for you. But at least you can explain to them what you need with this info, right? So I made a drill bushing that goes in to that bore snugly. You know, it can't be wallering around. You gotta get the bore nice and clean, get a good measurement, make yourself a bushing. The hole size that I used was for a drill that actually was a little bit small. I mean, it was the closest. I didn't want to go up to the next size because it would have been kind of too sloppy. And I didn't have, maybe they're metric, I'm not sure. I don't remember the numbers now, but I went with a hole size that was just about the exact same size as this tip. And so I put the bushing in, I drilled the hole through, and it's kind of nasty because when it breaks through, you're breaking through at an angle. So you gotta just take your time, go very slow, and then don't think you're necessarily done, because I wasn't, right? At that point the hole was through and it was bigger, but it wasn't bigger enougher. I had a little, hang on. So when I first did it, these would just barely poke through, and they were hitting on the bottom edge of this hole, because as the drill bit broke through, it kind of walked off a little bit. So you gotta take the time to clean So what I did was I pushed the injector in, turned it a little, and it would leave a little black mark where it was rubbing. So I took a Dremel with a little tiny stone, and there again, don't be a hammerhead, all right? Take it easy, and you just kind of go in there and massage those black spots away, and then stop, clean it, try it again. And then eventually you get it, so, I mean, you can tell when it goes through. It slides right in and comes to a dead stop. It's not like binding in the hole. So that's what they should look like. They come through that far because the pistons are dished to accept them. Now there's something I'm not sure of. Our pistons are custom made pistons. They don't have a witch's hat in the top of the piston. They just have a relief cut in, and they have valve reliefs. So I don't know. You'd have to be very, very, I mean, the stock injector sticks through. So you'd have to be very careful. Well, here, let me show you. You don't want to just ram these injectors in there and think you're good to go. You got to check and make sure you've got piston clearance. Yeah, see, the stock injector doesn't go through as far. So I would be very wary about putting these injectors in with stock pistons and trying to just run it. Take your time, check things. Silly putty is your friend. Put it together, roll it over very carefully, take it back apart, and see what it looks like, you know? Just like your valve clearance. If you're not sure about your piston to valve clearance, same thing. Put a little silly putty on there, put the head on. I know it takes time, but it's better than throwing this thing together and firing it up. And worst case scenario is it runs okay, and then you get it out there and we twist this thing. The stock application for these engines is, I think they're governed at 2,800 RPM or something like that. We turn this thing 6,400 RPM coming off the line. So it's gonna stretch things a bit, okay? You gotta be careful. You gotta make sure you have your clearances correct. But that's the gist of getting these bigger injectors into one of these heads. Like I say, I don't want you to think that's it and we're ready to go, because there's a whole lot of stuff you need to check and verify before you do that. And if you don't understand what I just said, or you're not capable of it, you need an engine builder. That's all there is to it, because with something like this, you're at that level where you may not be able to do it yourself. If you don't have the tools or the understanding, do yourself a favor. Find somebody to help you that does, or hire somebody to do it that does, whatever the case. That's where a lot of times in a class like this, the cost of entry is so high, because people can't do it themselves and they have to hire it done, and that's totally understandable. But if you can do these things yourself, if you understand everything I just said, and you can do it yourself, or you have a friend that can help you, who between the two of you have a good full understanding of it, I'd go for it. It's a lot of fun. But I'm gonna just finish cleaning this up. I just put the valves back in. I did a valve job on it while it was apart. New valve seals. I'm gonna finish cleaning it up, and it'll be ready to go on the tractor. There is one other thing, and I actually don't have the pieces right here this second, but it's really a simple thing. But these injectors are longer, they're taller, obviously, and your stock injector holds down here on this short guy, and you got to be up here. So these are studs. The factory ones are studs with the clamp. You can get longer studs, or you can just use bolts, is fine. But you got to remember that you are going to need longer hardware to get up high enough to clamp these other injectors in there. And one important thing to remember is that one of these two holes, it's this one that's near the intake port, that hole goes through. So I would encourage you to put some thread sealer in there. I don't know if they intentionally drilled it through, but it definitely breaks through into the port in here. So you're gonna wanna make some effort to seal that up. It's not water, it's your boost though. There's boost pressure behind that. So it could certainly cause a leak. So that, I think that's the gist of it. This head runs roller rockers, which are modified Mopar rocker arms. And in fact, let me, I'll get that hardware and I'll show you how that works. So, unfortunately, I can't give you the full lowdown on this because I didn't do it. The previous owners figured this piece of the puzzle out. And like I said, these are Mopar roller rockers of some sort. They use the stock stands. I don't know if the common shaft is the Yanmar one or if it's the Mopar one cut down, or can't tell you much about it. They had to do some clearancing. Here, I'll show you. There's machining done, you know, to make the roller line up with the valve stem. But that's something I cannot give you the details on because I don't have them. And you may be wondering why I'm willing to give you details at all, because a lot of people in all sorts of, you know, motorsports competition, you don't get a lot of info out of them. You know, they don't want to share. But like I said, this ProStock class is struggling to survive. There's not many of them. We're always having to mix with the limited Pro stocks with a weight and hitch differential, and that sometimes causes trouble. You know, people don't like it. And that goes with any blended class and pulling. If you're going to try to, if you don't have the numbers in a certain division, it only makes sense to come up with a handicap and blend them in with another class. But back to what I was saying, the reason I'm showing you all this stuff and giving you some info is I would love to see more guys build these tractors. So if you're thinking about it, if you got questions, put them in the comments, or you can find me on other social media, whatever. Get a hold of me. You may know me if you're somewhat local. You know who I am. So just get a hold of me. I'm always willing to answer questions. I look at garden tractor pulling as a thing that I do for fun. It is not a thing that I do to be ultra competitive in, and that shows by me never winning. But it's just a fun thing. It's not a thing that I'm you know, I'm not so competitive in it that I'm gonna withhold information from you so you can't catch up to me. That's all. Now I set this on here just to show you how it works. I have to pull it back off to get the head bolts in, but that's the gist of it. They switched to studs instead of bolts. Factory setup, I believe, is bolted on, and they converted it to these rockers. Now, did they machine the height of these blocks and stuff? I can't give you that. I don't know it. If I knew it, I would tell you. Yeah, right when things are going pretty well. I stripped out one of the rocker arm adjusters. The thread's galled to the nut, and she self-destructed on me. I'll show you. So there's the jam nut goes on, and for whatever reason it locked up. Boy, I couldn't adjust it. I took it out. I could not gently make it come loose no matter what I did. Finally, I just had to force it off, and it took the threads with it. So my son took some brand new set screws and machined the ends of the set screws to match. So Just set us back. It's been a couple days since the last little bit of video there, but got nylock lock washers now, which is a slight improvement over just a straight up jam nut, and all new screws. He did a whole set of them while he was at it, so I'm just going to replace them all so they match. These are the things that slow you down, you know. All right, that's mostly, all I gotta do is top off fluids, and she's ready to test fire, I think. I don't know, I think I tightened all the bolts. You know you're doing it right when you have all the tools out on whatever you're working on. Got all the fuel lines. I even remembered to put the thread sealer on the one screw on each one that goes into the intake port. Yay me, a gold star. That valve cover, my son made that. It's kind of a neat piece. I did that teardown video. You may want to go back and watch that if you have questions about what you're seeing, because I probably talked about it in there. But yeah, I got to run to town. I got to get a filter and some oil and fill that and fill the antifreeze, and she's ready to go. I got the data collections all back on. She's good. So I'll get this buttoned up, and we'll get it rolled outside and fire it up, run it through a couple of heat cycles and see how it goes. Like I had mentioned, we run a wet block and a wet head. This is just a fairly cheapish aluminum radiator. I think it's a Honda car replacement, like an aftermarket deal. This same company, CX Racing, builds these little coolant pumps. They're made for intercoolers, but we made a block here and a block here that all that replaces the factory water pump connections and the pump, and allows you to run just this little 12-volt electric pump. It probably isn't enough flow if you were driving this thing on the road, but for what we do, all we want to do is keep the water circulating through the block. Really, we don't hardly even need coolant, except for if we want to cool it down in between runs, But we do run the pump. As soon as the thing is up to like 140 degrees or so, we turn the water pump on, get it circulating, and then we leave it on until it's cooled down after the run. Same with the fan. The fan is on there's a switch. Well, there's a relay. There's relays for both the fan and the water pump, and then we use like a 180 degree switch or 160 degree switch or something to turn the fan on and off. So you really can leave the thing, walk away from it. It'll just run until it gets cooled off, and then it shuts off. So it's a slick setup. We also run we added this just a factory block heater, and the reason for that is we typically go to one indoor show, the one in Pennsylvania at least, and would like to go to more. And those are generally in the winter, and the barns are not real warm. So with that, we can turn on the water pump, plug in the block heater, plug in a battery charger, and throw a heat lamp under the transmission, and you can have this whole tractor really nice and toasty warm in half an hour or an hour. But that's It's not something you have to do. It's just something we did for that reason. A lot of guys are running a dry block and a dry head, and they fill them, or at least fill the head. A lot of guys run just an empty block with nothing and then fill the head. If you look at the big tractors, the 6-cylinder tractors, full-size tractors, several of those guys are still running an empty block, a filled head and a dry block with nothing, and they leave the frost plugs out, and they'll take a leaf blower in between passes and just cool it with air, if they need to try to cool it down a little quicker. This tractor has data collection, like I said. It's hard money to spend when you're building a tractor. It really is. But you learn so much faster when you have data to look at. It really is worth it. This one has the dash. Like I said, this was built by someone else. We didn't build it. If I were building it, I would probably just put a mechanical oil pressure and temperature gauge. I wouldn't spring for the dash. The dash is like an extra $1,000 or something, $800. But you can get the data without the dash. The data is, well, at least with this brand, the data collection is all done under here in that black box, and you can take the card out and read the data. You don't need to have a dash to see it. So that'd be my advice. There's a ton of different companies out there now for data. I think they're all pretty good. But data it gets you, you'll know if something's wrong much faster. And when you're building it and tuning it, it really is helpful, because without it, all you have for data is what you can see and what you can hear. And you may miss a lot of things that you would pick up instantly if you had the data. So that's my sales pitch for data collection. But it is a thing that you definitely can cut if you have to cut some money out of a project. I'll get what I got to get. We'll get these fluids topped off, and we'll fire this thing up. All right, it's been weeks since I said I was ready to start this tractor. But I had that big camper in the way. It just plugs up the whole shop. So I got that out today, and I think I'm ready to fire this thing off. I'm gonna crack an injector just because the whole system was drained down. There was no fuel in it. So I'm gonna crack an injector, crank it over till I get at least some bubbling action. Then I'll just tighten that down, and she may need a sniff of ether, she may not. This tractor still has some compression. The compression ratio is cut quite a bit from stock, but it's still, on a warm day, a lot of times it'll start with no ether at all, or just a sniff. Once we get fuel to it, it may very well just pop right up. But just, wait and see. That's what's nice about that electric lift pump. You don't have to crank a lot. Try a different one. I walked over to get the camera. The fan was running. It went through 2 cycles of the fan on. Gets up to 160, fan comes on. Cools it right back down to like 145. Fan turns off. By the time I walked to get the camera and came back, the fan had already turned off. But you can hear that little pump is running. That's circulating water right now. It'll continue to cool the whole system. So it's cooling the block, it's cooling what's in the radiator and what's in the block. I just gotta check all the fluids over, make sure everything's good, and then I can start I gotta put the side shields back on by the motor, and there's a cover that goes on by the transmission, all that kind of crap. I gotta get the water injection system back together. I take it apart and drain it for the winter because I don't store it. I store it in here, but it's not always heated, so it could freeze. I'll let this cool off. Probably tomorrow, once I have it back together, I'll probably start it one more time, warm it up again. You know, I like to run it through a couple of heat cycles, make sure everything seems okay. I'll make sure we're not pushing any air into the radiator, and we'll assume that we have it fixed. And then it needs a good cleaning, and then I can tuck it away in the corner and forget about it until tractor pull season comes, which is coming pretty soon. So there it is. I've brought you along. The old video, we tore it apart, and in this video, we put it back together. If you're interested in these little diesel tractors, I hope it was helpful, whether you're thinking about building one or buying one or whatever. If you'd like to buy this one, it's for sale. It's not on sale, it's for sale. There's a difference. But you can reach out to me on my social media. Is easy to find, I think, anyways. If you got questions about anything that you saw, or you know, anything about garden tractor pulling or whatever, fire away in the comments. I'll read them all and I'll answer them if there's a question, you know. So go ahead and fire away. But thanks for watching. I do appreciate you. Make sure you have subscribed. There will be some more garden tractor stuff coming up, and we have our charity tractor pull coming up in July. Oh boy, that's only a couple months away. I'm never going to be ready. But if you're local, come on out and spend a day with us. We'd love to have you. I'd love to meet you. Make sure you find me and introduce yourself. Thank you for your time. God bless you. God bless the United States of America.